The medical bay of the research facility buzzed with activity. Dr. Do-Yum Kim hadn't slept in 24 hours, but she couldn't leave. The stasis pod now sat in the center of the room, surrounded by the best medical equipment Earth had to offer. Admiral Hae-Nul Song stood nearby, her decorated uniform reflecting the pod's soft blue light. "Are you sure about this?" the Admiral asked, watching the medical team prepare their equipment. "Once we wake him, there's no going back." Do-Young nodded. "The pod systems are starting to end the stasis cycle on their own. If we don't help with the awakening process, we might lose him." The medical team, led by Dr. Hyun-Woo Choi, worked carefully to connect their monitoring equipment to the pod. The strange alien technology seemed to accept their devices, almost as if it had been designed to work with human equipment. "Stasis cycle at 80% completion," announced one of the medical staff. "Vital signs are stable. Brain activity increasing." Captain Ja-Ho Lee entered the room with a bundle of clothes. "We found a modern uniform that matches his old rank," he said. "I thought it might help him feel more comfortable." The pod's light grew brighter. Inside, they could see General Ta-1 Park's fingers beginning to move slightly. 700 years of sleep were coming to an end. "Stasis cycle at 95%, called out Dr. Choi. Beginning final wake-up sequence." The pod's surface became transparent, and its top slowly opened. Cool mist spilled out across the floor. General Park's eyes fluttered open, and he took his first breath in 7 centuries. Dr. Choi quickly moved forward with his team, checking vital signs and helping the general sit up. To everyone's surprise, Park moved smoothly, as if he had only been asleep for a few hours. The general looked around the room, his eyes sharp and alert. He took in the advanced medical equipment, the strange uniforms, and the surprised faces of everyone watching him. Then he spoke, his voice clear and strong. "I assume, given the level of technology I'm seeing, that it's been quite some time." Admiral Song stepped forward. "General Park, I'm Admiral Hae-Nul Song of the Earth Defense Fleet. You've been in stasis for approximately 700 years." Park nodded slowly, processing this information with remarkable calm. "Earth Defense Fleet," he repeated. "We're at war, aren't we? I can see it in how you carry yourselves." Do-Young was amazed at his perception. Even just awakened, he was reading the room and the situation with incredible skill. "Yes," Admiral Song admitted. "We're losing the war against an alien force called the Meridian Collective. They're more advanced than us, better armed, and they're pushing us back on every front." Park stood up, accepting a steadying hand from Dr. Choi. "Show me," he said simply. Captain Lee brought forward a holographic display, showing the current state of the war. Park studied it intently, his eyes moving from point to point, taking in centuries of technological advancement without hesitation. "Their attack patterns," he said suddenly. "They're using an advanced version of ancient encirclement tactics, cutting off support lines, isolating strong points, then crushing them one by one." He looked up at Admiral Song. "They're fighting a very old war with very new weapons." Do-Young watched in amazement as Park began pointing out details in the Meridian strategy that their best military minds had missed. He saw patterns in their movements that suddenly seemed obvious once he explained them. "The technology has changed," Park said, his voice growing stronger. "But war? War never changes. It's still about people, about psychology, about knowing how your enemy thinks." He straightened his shoulders, looking every bit the legendary general from the history books. "Now tell me everything I need to know about our enemy. Every detail matters." Admiral Song looked at Do-Young, a spark of hope in her eyes. Maybe this was why the aliens had preserved him. Maybe they had known that humanity would need not just his military knowledge, but his way of thinking, his ability to see through the chaos of war to the patterns beneath. The war was about to change. The Meridians wouldn't know it for a while yet, but their perfect record of victories was about to meet a very old, very experienced obstacle. General Ta-1 Park stood at the window of the space station, watching Earth's defense ships practice their maneuvers. It had been 2 weeks since his awakening, and he had spent every moment learning about modern warfare. The sight of spacecraft moving through the darkness of space still amazed him, but his military mind was already seeing patterns in their movements. "Their turns are too wide," he said to Admiral Haenul Song, who stood beside him. "They're thinking in 2 dimensions, like old sea battles. Space is different. The enemy can come from any direction." Admiral Song nodded, making notes on her tablet. She had learned quickly that when General Park noticed something, it was worth remembering. "What would you suggest?" "Show me the ship's controls again," Park requested. A young officer named Mirai Kang stepped forward with a holographic training system. Park had taken a liking to her because she asked smart questions and fought differently from the other officers. "Look here," Park said, his hands moving through the hologram. "These ships can spin on any axis. Why turn in a wide arc when you can flip and fire in any direction?" He demonstrated a new movement pattern, one that looked like an ancient martial arts technique adapted for space. Mirai's eyes widened. "That would cut our response time in half," she said excitedly. "And it would save fuel, too." Admiral Song watched as Park worked with the pilots, teaching them to think differently about space combat. He took ideas from ancient Korean naval battles, from martial arts, even from old video games he used to play, and turned them into new tactics for space warfare. Later that day, Dr. Do-Yum Kim found Park in the strategy room, surrounded by holographic maps of recent battles. He was studying the Meridian attacks, looking for patterns that others had missed. "They're proud," he said when he noticed her watching. "They think their technology makes them unbeatable. That's why they keep using the same tactics." He pointed to several battle sites. "See, they always attack the same way because it's always worked before. That's their weakness." Do-Young sat down beside him. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you adapt so quickly to all this new technology?" Park smiled. "Technology changes, but people don't. The Meridians aren't just machines. They're beings with thoughts and feelings. Pride, fear, anger. These things shape their decisions, just like they shaped battles in my time." Just then, Captain Jai-Ho Lee rushed into the room. "General, we've detected Meridian ships near the Jupiter defense line. They're using a new formation we haven't seen before." Park studied the incoming data. The Meridian ships were arranged in a pattern that looked chaotic at first glance, but he saw something familiar in it. "Not new," he said, smiling. "Very old. This is like a cavalry flanking maneuver I once read about, just adapted for space." He turned to Admiral Song, who had just entered the room. "Get me the fleet commanders. I'll show them how to counter this." Within hours, Park had designed a defense strategy. He worked with Mirai to translate his ideas into modern military terms, using the young officer's technical knowledge to refine his plans. As they worked, Dr. Kim watched the general closely. The alien civilization that had preserved him must have seen this ability, this gift for seeing the patterns of war beneath the surface of technology. They had known that humanity would need someone who could bridge the gap between past and future. "Remember," Park told the fleet commanders during their briefing, "spacecraft are just like horses, ships, or tanks. They're tools. The real battle is between minds." He pointed to the holographic display of the approaching Meridian fleet. "And right now, their minds are stuck in patterns they think are unbeatable. Let's show them something they've never seen before." The commanders left the briefing with new confidence. For the first time since the war began, they weren't just fighting with technology. They were fighting with the wisdom of centuries of human warfare behind them. Dr. Do-Yum Kim sat in her lab, surrounded by holographic images of the stasis pod that had held General Park. After their victory at Proxima Centauri, she had more questions than ever about the pod's origins. Dr. Hyun-Woo Choi worked beside her, comparing the pod's symbols with those found in alien ruins across the solar system. "Look at this pattern," Do-Young said, pointing to a series of flowing lines on the pod's surface. "We've seen it before, in the Mars ruins, but also in the old records from Mercury. She pulled up more images, showing similar designs from different planets. Hyun-woo adjusted his glasses, studying the patterns carefully. "These aren't just decorations," he said slowly. "They're telling a story." He pointed to one symbol after another. "See how they connect. It's like they're showing a journey through space." As they worked, Captain Jae-ho Lee entered the lab with new data from their latest scans of the pod. "The energy readings are unlike anything we've seen before," he reported. "But there's something else. The pod's material. It responds to human touch differently than other materials." Do-young remembered how warm the pod had felt when she first touched it. She pulled up more data on her screen, showing how the pod had maintained General Park's life for centuries. It wasn't just keeping him alive, she realized. It was studying him, learning about humans. Just then, her computer beeped with a new discovery. The symbols on the pod matched perfectly with writing found in a newly discovered alien library on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The computer began translating the ancient text. "This is incredible," Hyun-woo said, reading the translation. "According to these records, an advanced civilization called the Guardians once watched over many species in our galaxy. They believed in preserving knowledge and protecting younger civilizations." "But why General Park?" Jae-ho asked, looking at the data. "Why preserve him specifically?" The answer came as they decoded more of the text. The Guardians had encountered the Meridian Collective long ago, in another part of the galaxy. They had seen how the Meridians conquered and destroyed other civilizations, always using their advanced technology to overwhelm their enemies. The Guardians knew the Meridians would eventually reach Earth, Do-young explained, piecing it together. They searched human history for someone who could understand war deeply enough to fight an enemy with superior technology. She looked at an image of General Park. They chose him because he knew how to think beyond just weapons and tactics. Hyun-woo found more translations about the Guardians' plan. "They didn't just preserve him," he said with amazement. "While he was in stasis, they shared knowledge with him. Military history from thousands of civilizations, all becoming part of his dreams. That's why he adapts so quickly to new situations," Jae-ho realized. "He's not just drawing from Earth's military history, but from the combined wisdom of countless civilizations." Do-young quickly sent a message to Admiral Song, requesting an urgent meeting. As she waited for a response, she studied the pod's symbols again. The Guardians hadn't just given humanity a weapon against the Meridians. They had given them a teacher, someone who could help them grow beyond their current limitations. "The Meridians think they're unbeatable because of their technology," she said. "But the Guardians knew that true strength comes from wisdom and understanding. That's why they chose Park, not just for his military knowledge, but for his ability to learn and teach others." As if to confirm her thoughts, new symbols appeared on the pod's surface, glowing softly. The Guardians had left more than just a sleeping general in that underground chamber. They had left hope for humanity's future, carefully preserved for 700 years until the moment it was needed most. 1 year after the Great Battle of Earth, General Park stood at the entrance of the new Interstellar Military Academy. The building combined architectural styles from all the allied species, creating something entirely new. Young officers from every allied world came here to learn, just as the Guardians had hoped they would. Mira Kang, now the Academy's chief instructor, walked beside Park as they toured the facility. In the main training room, holograms showed battles from throughout history, not just from Earth, but from all their allied species. Students studied these battles together, learning from each other's past. "They're eager to learn everything," May told Park, as they watched a mixed group of human and alien students discuss ancient Korean battle tactics. Not just about fighting, but about working together, understanding different ways of thinking. Dr. Do-young Kim and Dr. Hyun-woo Choi had their own wing in the academy. They continued to study the Guardians' technology, making new discoveries every day. The stasis pod that had preserved Park now helped them understand more about the ancient civilization that had planned so far ahead. The Guardians knew something we're just learning. Du-Yum explained to a group of visiting officials. The greatest power isn't in weapons or technology. It's in understanding. Understanding history, understanding each other, and understanding ourselves. Admiral Song, who now led the combined fleet of all allied species, met with Park in his office at the Academy. The room had a window looking out at Earth on one side and the stars on the other, symbolizing the connection between past and future. The Meridians have asked for peace talks, she told him. Real ones this time. They've seen that their way isn't the only way, or even the best way. They want to learn from us, just as we've learned from each other. Park nodded, remembering his own journey from the past to the present. Wars teach us how to fight, he said, but peace teaches us why we fight. The Guardians understood this. They didn't just preserve me to win a war. They wanted to preserve the knowledge of how to build something after the war. In the Academy's garden, designed with plants from all allied worlds, Ambassador Sun Hai-yun hosted diplomatic meetings where former enemies learned to become friends. The Meridians, humbled by their defeat, began to see the value in diversity and cooperation. Captain Jae-ho Lee, now a senior instructor, taught classes about how different species could work together in space combat. Every species brings something unique, he would tell his students. Just like General Park brought ancient wisdom to future battles. The technology from Park's stasis pod led to many new discoveries, but more important were the lessons learned about working together, about combining old wisdom with new ideas. The Academy became famous not just for teaching military strategy, but for teaching understanding between different peoples. Park spent his days teaching and learning. He learned new things from every species, just as they learned from him. The Guardians' dream of different civilizations working together and growing stronger through their differences had come true. One evening, as the sun set behind Earth, Park found Mi-Ray working late in the tactical training room. "What are you teaching them tomorrow?" he asked. "I'm teaching them about you," she said with a smile. "Not just about how you won the war, but about how you brought us all together. About how someone from the past helped us build a better future." Park looked out at the stars, thinking about the long journey that had brought him here. The Guardians had preserved him for 700 years, but what they had really preserved was hope. Hope that different peoples could learn from each other, grow together, and build something greater than any one civilization could create alone. The greatest victories, he told Mi-Ray, are the ones that lead to peace. That's the most important lesson of all. The Proxima Centauri checkpoint was quiet. Too quiet, General Park thought as he studied the holographic display in the command center. The Meridian ships had taken the bait, just as he had predicted. Their pride wouldn't let them ignore such an apparently easy target. "All ships report ready," Mi-Ray Kang announced from her station. She had been chosen as Park's tactical officer for this mission, and her fingers moved quickly over the control panels. "The enemy fleet will be in position in 5 minutes." Admiral Song stood beside Park, watching the Meridian ships move closer. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "We're risking a lot of ships on this plan." Park nodded, his eyes never leaving the display. "The Meridians think they know everything about space combat," he said, "but they've never seen what I'm about to show them." He turned to Mi-Ray. "Begin Phase 1. The human ships near the checkpoint started to move, appearing to flee in panic. The Meridian fleet, seeing what looked like an easy victory, charged forward. Their ships were bigger and faster than the human vessels, their weapons more powerful. They had won every battle this way before, but this time was different. Now, Park ordered when the Meridian ships reached the exact spot he had chosen. Mi-Ray sent the signal, and suddenly the space around the enemy fleet lit up with hundreds of small devices that had been hidden among the asteroids. "Activate the gravity disruptors," Park commanded. The devices turned on all at once, creating a web of artificial gravity fields that caught the Meridian ships like fish in a net. Their momentum worked against them, pulling their neat formation into chaos. "Phase 2, Park said calmly. The human ships that had been fleeing suddenly turned around, using the new movement techniques Park had taught them. They spun and fired from unexpected angles, their smaller size now an advantage in the disrupted gravity field. "They're confused," Mayray reported, watching the enemy ships struggle. "Their formation is breaking apart." Park smiled. "They're used to fighting in open space, where their bigger ships have the advantage. Now they're trapped in a web of their own momentum." He turned to Admiral Song. "Launch Phase 3. From behind nearby asteroids, more human ships appeared. They were the smallest in the fleet, ships that the Meridians usually ignored. But Park had seen their potential. Under his guidance, these small ships had been fitted with special equipment. "Small strike teams, moving in fast," Mayray announced. "Just like you planned, sir." The small ships darted between the trapped Meridian vessels. They didn't try to destroy the enemy ships. Instead, they attached devices to their hulls. Devices that disrupted the Meridians' advanced targeting systems. In ancient times, Park explained to Admiral Song as they watched, "We learned that you don't always need to destroy an enemy's weapons. Sometimes it's better to make those weapons useless." The Meridian fleet was in complete disarray. Their advanced technology, which had always given them the advantage, was now working against them. Their complicated targeting systems couldn't handle the disruption, while the simpler human weapons worked just fine. "Enemy ships are retreating," Mayray reported, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Confirmed hits on 60% of their vessels. No major damage to our fleet." Admiral Song stared at the display in amazement. "We didn't just survive," she said. "We won. Actually won." Park nodded, already making notes for the next battle. "We won because we surprised them. Next time they'll be ready for these tactics. That's why we need to keep thinking of new ways to use old ideas." As the human fleet regrouped, word of the victory spread quickly through the ranks. For the first time, the Meridians had been defeated. Their aura of invincibility was gone. In the command center, Mayray looked at Park with newfound respect. "How did you know it would work?" she asked. "Because," Park said, "sometimes the best way forward is to look backward." The Meridians were so focused on the future that they forgot to learn from the past. The command room fell silent as General Park finished explaining his plan. Admiral Song stared at the holographic map of the solar system, her face showing both worry and amazement. The alien leaders from their new alliance looked at each other, unsure what to think. "You want to use Earth itself as bait?" Admiral Song finally asked. "Our homeworld. Everything we've been fighting to protect." Park nodded, walking through the holographic planets. "The Meridians think they know us. They expect us to defend Earth at all costs, so we'll give them exactly what they expect. Until we don't." Mayray Kang stepped forward, helping to explain the plan with detailed projections. "Our intel from the Etherin scouts shows the Meridians are gathering their largest fleet ever. They think one massive attack will end the war." "And you want them to bring this fleet to Earth?" the Lumini leader asked, his silver skin shimmering with concern. "Isn't that exactly what we don't want?" Park smiled, reminding them all of an old saying. "Sometimes the best place to hide is right in front of your enemy." He touched the hologram, and new images appeared. "The Meridians will expect us to defend Earth from the front. They'll expect us to fight desperately, emotionally, without thinking clearly." The Velari commander, understanding beginning to show in her dark eyes, finished the thought. "But that's not what we're going to do." "No," Park agreed. "We're going to think very clearly indeed." He expanded the map to show the positions of all their allied forces. "The Aetherins will guide their fleet through these routes, making them think they've found our weakest points. The Lumini technology will appear to malfunction at just the right moments." Mayray added more details to the display. "The Velari stealth ships will feed them exactly the information we want them to see. The Cronus defense platforms will seem vulnerable. Everything will tell them this is their perfect chance to strike. The Teth healer, who had been quiet until now, raised a question. But what happens when their fleet arrives? Even with our combined forces, they'll outnumber us greatly. Park's eyes lit up with the same fire that had won battles centuries ago. They will find themselves in a trap 700 years in the making. He showed them the next part of his plan, explaining how the Guardian's technology found in his stasis pod could be used in ways the Meridians would never expect. Admiral Song began to understand. "We're not just fighting a battle," she said slowly. "We're creating a story they'll believe. Every piece of information, every movement, every apparent weakness. It's all part of the tale we're telling them." "Yes," Park said. "And when they think they know how the story ends, we'll show them a different ending." He looked at each alien leader in turn. "But this only works if we trust each other completely. Every species, every ship, every warrior must play their part perfectly." The room was quiet again, but this time with a different kind of silence. It was the silence of minds seeing a new possibility, of hope beginning to grow. The Etherin leader spoke first. "My people know those space lanes better than anyone. We'll make sure the Meridians follow the path you've chosen." One by one, the other leaders added their support. The Lumini would adapt their technology. The Velari would plant the false information. The Cronus would position their defenders. The Teth would prepare their medical ships for the aftermath. As the meeting ended, Admiral Song stayed behind with Park. "This plan," she said, "it's like nothing in our military history." "No," Park agreed. "It's like everything in military history. Every great victory, every successful defense, every surprise attack, all of them teach us something. The Guardians knew this. That's why they wanted us to remember the past as we fight for our future." The Earth looked beautiful and vulnerable from the command center of the space station. General Park watched as the massive Meridian fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system, just as his plan had predicted. Thousands of enemy ships moved forward, their formation perfect and threatening. Fleet Commander Minji Baek stood at her control station, coordinating with all their allied forces. The Etherin ships had led the Meridians exactly where Park wanted them. The Lumini technology was sending out false signals that made Earth's defenses look weaker than they were. The Velari stealth ships moved silently through space, watching and waiting. "They're following the exact path we prepared," Myre reported, her fingers moving quickly over her controls. "Every piece of false information we planted is working. They think they know all our weaknesses." Admiral Song watched the enemy fleet's approach with calm eyes. "All ships report ready," she said. "The Cronus defense platforms are in position. The Teth medical ships are standing by. We're as prepared as we'll ever be." Park nodded, remembering ancient battles where everything had depended on timing and trust. "Send the signal to begin Phase 1, he ordered. The Earth's defense fleet began to move, appearing to struggle against the Meridian advance. The enemy ships pressed forward, confident in their superior numbers and technology. They didn't realize that every move they made was part of Park's plan. "They're entering the gravity net zone," Myre announced. Hidden devices, based on the technology from Park's stasis pod, waited throughout the solar system. But these were far more powerful than the ones used in their first victory. "Now," Park commanded. Minji sent the signal, and suddenly space itself seemed to change around the Meridian fleet. The gravity nets activated, but instead of just trapping the enemy ships, they created specific paths that forced the Meridians to move exactly where Park wanted them. The Meridian commanders tried to adjust their formation, but Park had studied their tactics too well. "They always respond the same way to surprises," he explained to Admiral Song. "That's why each trap leads them into another trap." As the Meridian fleet split up to deal with the gravity distortions, the Allied forces struck. Etherin ships appeared from hidden jump points, cutting off their escape routes. Lumini weapons disabled the Meridian's most powerful ships. Velari stealth vessels emerged from nowhere to strike critical targets. "They're realizing it's a trap," Myre said, watching the enemy fleet try to regroup. "But they still don't understand how complete it is." Park pressed a button, activating the final phase of his plan. The Guardian's technology, carefully studied and adapted, created a massive energy field around the Meridian fleet. Their advanced weapons and communication systems began to fail, but the simpler systems of the Allied ships worked perfectly. In ancient times, Park told Minji, as they watched the battle unfold, armies would sometimes become trapped in valleys or mountains, their strength turned against them. Space is no different. It's just a matter of understanding the terrain and your enemy's mind. The Meridian fleet, for the first time in their history, fell into complete chaos. Their perfect formation broke apart. Their advanced technology, which they had always relied on, became useless. The combined forces of Earth and its allies struck from all directions, using simple but effective tactics that needed no complex systems. Hours later, as the last Meridian ships retreated or surrendered, Admiral Song turned to Park. "You didn't just win a battle," she said. "You changed the way space warfare will be fought forever." Park shook his head, smiling. "No, we all did this together. Every species brought their strength, their courage, their trust. The Meridians lost because they never learned that lesson. True strength comes from unity, not superiority." General Park stood in the great meeting hall of the space station, Unity Point, watching ships from 5 different alien species dock at the station. Ambassador Sun Hai-Yun stood beside him, reviewing information about each species on her tablet. After the victory at Proxima Centauri, other civilizations that had suffered under the Meridians began reaching out to Earth. "The blue-skinned ones are the Aetherans," Sun Hai explained. "They lost 3 worlds to the Meridians. The tall, silver beings are the Lumini. The Meridians took their home system 2 years ago." She pointed to each arriving group. "The others are the Velari, the Cronus, and the Teth. All of them want to fight back, but they're afraid." Park nodded, studying each species carefully. "Fear is natural," he said, "but it can be overcome with trust and understanding." He had spent the last week learning about each species' culture and history, just as he had once studied Earth's different cultures before making alliances. The first meeting began with tension in the air. The different species sat far apart from each other, their distrust visible in their body language. Park recognized these signs. He had seen the same thing in ancient peace talks between nations on Earth. "Before we talk about war," Park said, standing to address the group, "let me tell you a story from Earth's history." He told them about ancient Korean kingdoms that had once fought each other but learned to work together against a common enemy. He explained how their different strengths had made them stronger together than they ever were alone. The aliens listened carefully. The Aetherine leader, who had lost family to the Meridians, spoke first. "But how can we trust each other? How can we work together when we are so different?" Park smiled. "Look at this room," he said. "Each of you brings something unique. The Aetherins know the Meridian supply routes. The Lumini understand their technology. The Velari are experts at stealth, the Cronus at defense, and the Teth at healing. Together, we have everything we need to win." Mira Kang, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward with a holographic display. "We've analyzed each of your species' strengths," she said. "General Park has designed battle strategies that use all of them together." The display showed simulations of combined fleet actions. Aetherine ships would guide them through secret routes. Lumini technology would counter Meridian weapons. Velari stealth ships would gather intelligence. Cronus defenders would protect their bases. Teth medical ships would keep their forces fighting. "The Meridians think they're superior because they're all the same," Park continued. "But that's their weakness. They don't understand the power of diversity, of different ways of thinking and fighting." As the meeting continued, the aliens began to move closer together. They shared stories of resistance against the Meridians. Park listened to each one, showing respect for their experiences and wisdom. He knew that winning their trust was as important as any battle plan. By the end of the day, something had changed in the room. The different species were talking freely, sharing ideas and hopes. Ambassador Sunhai watched in amazement as ancient rivalries began to fade in the face of a common purpose. "How did you know this would work?" she asked Park quietly. "The Guardians didn't just teach me about war," he replied. "They showed me how countless civilizations learn to work together. Peace and war are two sides of the same coin. To win this war, we need both." As the alien leaders left the meeting, each one stopped to shake Park's hand or offer their species' gesture of respect. They had come seeking a military alliance, but had found something more. A vision of different species working together as equals. "Tomorrow," Park told Myray, as they watched the alien ships depart, "we start planning our first joint operation. The Meridians won't expect us to work together. That surprise will be our greatest weapon." Dr. Do-Yum Kim wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carefully brushed away centuries of dust from the metal door. The underground chamber was hot and stuffy, but she couldn't contain her excitement. After 3 months of digging beneath the ruins of an old Korean military base, her team had finally found something promising. "Dr. Kim, you need to see this," called her assistant, shining a bright light on some markings. The symbols were clearly military, but the metal showed no signs of rust or decay. This was strange for something that had been buried for over 700 years. Do-Young adjusted her safety helmet and moved closer. The door was made of a material she had never seen before. When she touched it, it felt warm, unlike the cold underground walls around them. "Captain Lee, we need your military clearance here," she called out to their military escort. Captain Ji-Ho Lee walked over, his footsteps echoing in the narrow tunnel. He was young for a captain, but his eyes showed the experience of someone who had seen too much of the current war. The war with the Meridian Collective had been going badly for Earth. Every day brought news of another lost battle, another fallen colony. Maybe that's why the military had finally allowed this dig. They were desperate for anything that might help. Ji-Ho placed his hand on the scanner beside the door. To everyone's surprise, it lit up with a soft blue glow. "Impossible," he whispered. "This technology shouldn't be working after all this time." The door slid open smoothly, revealing a room that looked like it was from another world. The walls glowed with a faint light, and in the center stood a large pod, its surface covered in a mix of Korean military symbols and strange, flowing patterns that seemed to move in the light. "This isn't 21st century technology," Do-Young said, walking around the pod. Her scanner showed active power readings. "This is something else entirely." The pod's surface was clear enough to see inside. Do-Young's heart nearly stopped when she saw what it contained. A man in a military uniform lay inside, looking as if he was merely sleeping. The uniform was old, very old, but the man's face showed no signs of age. That's impossible," Ji-Ho said, staring at the nameplate on the uniform. "That's General Tadwan Park. He's a legend in military history. He disappeared in 2024 during a classified operation. Some say he was the greatest military mind of his time." Do-Young checked her readings again. "He's alive. The pod has kept him in perfect condition. Some kind of stasis technology, but far more advanced than anything we have now." As they studied the pod, Do-Young noticed something else. Hidden in the patterns on its surface were symbols that matched recently discovered alien ruins on Mars. This wasn't made by humans, she realized. Something, wanted to preserve him. The team worked carefully to secure the site. Within hours, the underground chamber was filled with researchers and military personnel. Everyone knew they had found something important, but nobody understood just how important it would become. Do-Young looked at the sleeping face of General Park. In all her years of archaeology, she had never found anything like this. Why had an advanced alien civilization preserved this particular man? What had they seen in him that made him so valuable? As she watched, the pod's lights began to pulse gently. After 7 centuries of silence, it was beginning to wake up. She grabbed her communicator. "This is Dr. Kim. Get me Admiral Song immediately. Tell her we found something that might change everything. And tell her to bring our best medical team." We're about to wake up a 700-year-old general. The war with the Meridians had been going badly. But as Do-Yum looked at the pod, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Whatever the aliens had seen in General Park, she had a feeling they were about to find out why they had kept him safe for all these centuries.